Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Julie Kratz. Julie is the founder and chief engagement officer of Next Pivot Point. She is a highly acclaimed TEDx speaker and inclusive leadership trainer who led teams and produced results in corporate America. After experiencing many career pivot points of her own, she started her own speaking business with the goal of helping leaders be more inclusive. Please join me in welcoming Julie Kratz. Welcome, Julie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So good to have you and welcoming you from your home office I know you're in Indiana. I don't know exactly where in Indiana you are.
I am in Indianapolis.
Indianapolis. All right. So from the heartland of America.
Yes, that is one way to describe it. It feels a little tumultuous right now.
So take us back to those early years. As you know, we like to learn about your formative years on Work from the Inside Out and find out, how might those have informed or not where you are today?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I know the formative years, those child years, have a lot of clues in them of what we're meant to do in the world and how we're meant to show up. But sometimes it's not obvious,
Yeah.
I remember early on, I think I was about 8 years old. So raised by a single mom, we had what we needed, but not, what we wanted. So very low discretionary income.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember conversations we would have about gender roles because I saw her in a very fluid state. And this is, the 1980s before we even had vocabulary around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a kid on the playground telling a joke not a joke, but he was sharing a riddle about, y'all remember, it's kind of an infamous one about a kid that gets hurt. His parent takes him to the doctor. The surgeon can't perform on this child because it's the parent. Well, how can that be? And if you remember, the riddle is kind of like, oh my gosh, it's the dad that takes him, and that's the mom, that's the surgeon. But no one can compute the fact that a woman could be a surgeon. And I just remember this. I'm 8 years old, and I remember being in the car with my mom, driving home from my babysitter, like, Mom, this happened today. I think this is really weird. And why would someone say that? And of course, a woman can be a surgeon. Why would anyone think that I can't be a surgeon? And so that's when it all began, or at least my earliest memory. But my mom always told me, my purpose was really to help women, primarily is what she saw. And I've really internalized that over the years. I did the corporate thing, and I unfortunately lost my mom in my early 20s. And so those words kept replaying in my mind of hey, I'm supposed to help women. And so, of course, she was right, as she was about most things. And that's when I started my business, Next Pivot Point. At the time I started it, I'd been in corporate for 12 years. It was shenanigan after shenanigan. I was just done. The lack of inclusion, lack of belonging, having to stuff yourself in this curmudgeon-y box, I couldn't do it anymore. I was only early 30s, but that mantra that she kept playing for me in the back of my head of your purpose is to help women. And so that's when I started Next Pivot Point. It really was about gender at the time, which now as I've unpacked it over the 9 years, we didn't have a term like DEI or diversity floating around then. But that's really what I think my mom meant. And that's what I intended to start. My business's purpose is really to help folks feel included, folks of all backgrounds, perspectives, to feel included in the workplace. And then unfortunately, I didn't get that. So, and I've got little ones. And so full circle moment. Yeah. I want the world to be more inclusive for them. I hope they don't have to go through the shenanigans that I went through.
I like the way you call it shenanigans.
It's silly behavior.
There's a lot of other ways we could describe that. I'm curious though, I think about, being a young child, and your mother telling you your purpose is to help women. I don't know if you remember how young you were when your mother was telling you that, because we're heavily influenced by things that our parents would say to us. And did you have any idea what that meant at the time, or what
That was
what did she
later.
model for you that made you even have a context for that at all?
Yeah. Yeah, that was later. She was pretty good about meeting me where I'm at.
Oh yeah.
On my journeys. And that wasn't the 8 years old conversation, but it did plant the seed because, over the years, I had a lot of experiences like that. And I got really into feminist reading, which was kind of funny in the 90s. I'm reading these feminist books that were made in like the 60s, 70s. Because the backlash of the 80s. And so it's funny when I started college and then as I entered my corporate career, my mom's like, don't worry, my generation took care of all of that. It is totally equal now. And with a good heart and mind, but here I am taking women's studies classes in college. And she's like, why are you going into business, Julie? Like, it seems like the women's studies thing. I was like, Mom, no one does this for work. Are you kidding me? Like, you're supposed to be successful and make the money and climb the corporate ladder. And I'm going to just lead by example and, just go through it.
Yeah.
And you just don't realize at 22, as I was when she told me that, like how deeply exhausting that path is going to be and how it is unequal and how it's filled with all sorts of hidden obstacles that you don't even know how to articulate when it's happening. I remember people sharing things with me like, Julie, you're too pleasing, but you need to be more confident. And it's like, which version of me is that? Or, hey, you need to dress more professionally, but I was like dressing just like my male counterparts. Or, hey, you can't go on that, really important travel assignment because we don't have enough hotel rooms. And so all the men are going to share rooms. It's just little things over time that you're like, this is really weird. Is there something wrong with me? No, there's nothing wrong with me. It was just a gendered experience of the workplace.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't like that, but I like the way you describe it, a gendered experience. I am curious what kind of work you were doing in the corporate sector. Not that we're going to pigeonhole that industry or anything, but just curious. Did you major in women's studies in college?
I minored in it. So I did the traditional route, the business degree with kind of the minor that I wouldn't even list on my resume or my background because my first job out of college was like Caterpillar construction company.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
And don't worry, there's no pigeonholing here. I tried every industry before. I was like, no, it's not an industry thing. It's just because that's what people say. Like, oh, that was really male dominated industry. Like, yeah, they all are. Okay.
Yeah.
So
you worked in a few different corporate settings?
Yeah. But the construction industry in particular, I mean, still today has vastly unchanged. And it's be interesting to see how long that's sustainable. But I did enter, a hyper dominant industry, workforce, and culture in Central Illinois. And so I tried to grind it out, hustle culture, work hard, kind of compartmentalize your personal self. I did that for 4 years. And then it's 2008. Financial crisis. I just started business school, went back to school at Indiana University. So that's how I made my way to Indiana, and fantastic MBA program where I met incredible people from all over the world. And it really opened my eyes to the value of diversity. And so then living with an Asian-born immigrant at the time really opened my eyes to her unique lived experience. And we worked together for a couple years in the insurance and financial services industries too. So tried that and it's like, not so much, still pretty stale and male and pale. And then finished my career in consulting, mostly in the agriculture industry, which is also, one demographic. But that was the industry where I did have probably the most male allies that, even though they were like, oh, you're like my work daughter, which is not appropriate behavior, but well-intentioned.
Yeah.
I did meet some really good ones that were like, hey, I think you're really good at facilitating. Like you seem like you're really good at facilitating hard conversations.
Ah.
I could see you doing that more. Would you be interested?
Ooh.
And so, someone that kind of puts up the mirror and is like, hey, did you see
Yeah.
this about yourself? You're pretty good at this, because we can't
Hmm.
see ourselves in the moment.
Right.
And then
right,
also
right.
like challenges you to do something you haven't done before, because a lot of us, especially that suffer from, kind of that imposter syndrome, as most of us
Mhm.
do. Well, I've never done that before. I don't know if I
Right.
could do that. Right. And well,
Right.
of course you haven't done it before. Like everything you haven't done before, you have to do once the first time.
Exactly. Right.
So that's when I started facilitating, really found my love for facilitation, and then
Mm.
got the courage to start my own business. But
Wow.
so rare, it just, all the dominoes kind of lined up in hindsight, but it was a
Yeah.
painful 12 years to get there. It really was. And I
Yeah.
hope I can shortcut that for other folks, because I don't want anyone to have to go through, again, so many more shenanigans stories that I
I
don't
like the
want.
shenanigans stories. I love that.
Hopefully that's
Yeah.
not an offensive term. Sometimes I share terms and I'm like, oh no, is that not inclusive? I think that one's okay.
Well,
But
there's a point where you can like second guess every word that
yeah,
comes out of your mouth, and then you can't even finish a sentence, right?
I know.
So
And listeners, I
I am
apologize if
sure
it is not. I did not research in advance, but
I am sure that you are, at least for the purposes of this podcast, you're doing just fine, Julie.
otherwise I might say something profane, which could be.
Yes, and this is a clean podcast. We don't we think profane thoughts, we just don't say them.
Perfect. So that is my beepity beep word.
The beepity beep. But I mean, let's just say that all those 12 years, as painful as they were in some ways, all the things that, and I always say this to my clients, all the things that you did, all the experiences you had led you to where you are now, and the kinds of things that because you worked in a variety of settings and in a variety of industries and probably a variety of roles, you have something to reflect on. You're not saying the things that you're saying now and the things that you're imparting to people from a vacuum. You're imparting them from very real experience.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of value in that. I'm curious, was there a specific turning point when you decided to start your own business, or was it more of a natural kind of organic evolution into that?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I mean, it was
Yeah.
very serendipitous, as I think a lot of, you work in the what's next space. I was asking the question, I just had a baby the year before, and so I'm the primary breadwinner. Not the ideal time to take on a bunch of risk, but it's also the time where a lot of women question purpose in their work, and primary caregivers, I should say. If you're torn walking out the door every day of like, what am I doing with my life? And I love this human being way more than what I'm doing. It's really hard to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And so it makes a lot of people kind of question things. So I was deeply questioning things. I was going to a lot of women's conferences. I kind of moved into a sales role. So I was like really networking with a lot of people, and people kept validating that about me. Like, wow, like, probably not the best salesperson. They didn't say that, but what I was good at, again, was facilitation and getting people to talk more openly about hard things and helping people understand how to be better. And when that light kind of got shown on that for me, and I got, positive feedback a lot, I thought, well, how could I do that more? And it just happened to be a client of mine that I was consulting with also saw that in me and offered me a contract role. So it was one of those like perfect storms where it's like, well, they need a contractor that was going to fill me up with enough work to get a business started. But then I had to start a business. And I remember thinking, well, I don't want to start a business. I'm not an entrepreneur. Again, imposter, right? And it's like, but they think I should. And then I, just put together the numbers and met with my accountant. He's like, well, seems like you could probably bring home as much as you were making in corporate. And like, yeah, you're going to have to travel. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And I'm not saying those first 3 years, I would not wish on anybody. It is brutal getting your name out there, getting people to believe you. The roller coaster of business is always a roller coaster, but those first 3 years are way highs and lows. And so we trucked through it. We made it through it. And, I had the support of my partner, my family, my allies,
Yeah.
wonderful clients I got to work with. And then really that was like the 3-year mark when I was like, I think this diversity stuff that I saw creeping up on LinkedIn, I was getting really active on LinkedIn, kind of like 2017. So Me Too era. I mean, y'all remember like the things that were happening back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so you saw these chief diversity officer titles, and I was like, never heard of that before. I want to know those people. And so I started meeting those people, and I started articulating needs like we need programming for employee resource groups, and we need to bring more people into the conversation. And so that was really what I'm best known for now in the work is allyship and how to be supportive of somebody that's very different from yourself or just slightly different from yourself, I should say, but somebody that's of a different, gender identity, a different racial group, disability, fill in the blank, but we're better, we're stronger together when we're all in it together, not dividing and conquering. So fast forward to today, and that's very much synergistic with the work I get to do today is really diversity, equity, inclusion with the lens of allyship and how to help folks in the majority group come into the conversation. And that's why I think as a white woman, I'm straight, I'm cisgender, I'm, for the moment, not disabled. So I've got a lot of privileges. Like, wow, like I should be using that to help other people. And so I find that to be a huge honor and a lifelong commitment to get better about that and help others get better.
I love it. I want to go back to the day you opened the door of your business, and you're saying, I'm not an entrepreneur. I mean, I don't know that anyone starts a business saying I'm an entrepreneur, but maybe a few people do. Did you know what the business was supposed to look like at that point? I mean, you had this contract, people were giving you positive feedback on your facilitation work around working with groups, getting people to have difficult conversations. It sounds like you were also doing maybe some training type work as well.
Yeah.
But what was that initial business? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was a totally different brand, a totally different vision. So when I first started out, I thought, okay, I'm again a white woman, so I should help women. And so I called it Help Your Team Grow because that was the only domain I could find that was leadership-y. And built my own website. At the time I was on Wix, and it was terrible. I was so bad. My branding, it was just all over the place. But, you had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. Yeah.
Most entrepreneurs struggle. They have the idea, but they're so afraid to take the next step. And so I built a lot of things on my own, and we completely pivoted again that year 3 when that main client of mine went away. I saw the DEI work, got way more passionate about allyship and researching that and doing, some books about it. I started to realize there was much more of an opportunity to pivot. And that ironically was my first book's name was Pivot Point, but you couldn't own that domain. I really wanted Pivot Point leadership. And it's like, no, can't get that domain, can't get Pivot Point or anything tangential to that. So I was brainstorming out loud with one of my friends one day, and she said, well, what question do people ask you the most? And I said, well, kind of like, what's next? People love to come to me like, what's next in the workplace? What's next with DEI work? What's next with my career? And so we Googled next Pivot Point, and sure enough, the domain was available. And so were all the social handles. And I thought, well, that's it.
There
Done.
you go.
So that's the brand that's stuck. And the interesting thing over the years is we've done branding work. I love engaging young people because their minds, I have a branding background, probably too much of a branding background to brand my own business, as most of us are, inside, we can't see out.
Yeah, right.
And so they said, like, is next Pivot Point you? Is it Julie Kratz? And I was like, well, it's both of us, but it's really by me. And so that was the fun tagline we got to add into the logo is by Julie Kratz. And then again, serendipity kind of takes over, and I now have a team of people and other facilitators. So it makes sense that my name isn't front and center, but that people know my name and they know my brand. So now it can be Next Pivot Point by Julie Kratz. And it makes sense when other people show up in the experience too.
Yeah. I appreciate you explaining how that evolved too, because I think sometimes when people look at, a business where you're providing a variety of services, you're also working around and in, topical areas that are, you can't always get your hands like right around them. They're not, they're not concrete, like we help people, increase their revenue by thus and such, or, it's not to say that there aren't ways to measure some things, but it's it's still, I think we're talking about an area that is under great development. And so it's great to hear how you evolved into that and what the thinking is behind that, because I think that gives people a sense of what it is and why it is, and how you arrived there. And I think that's really interesting. And so as you saw a lot of things coming up around DEI, and you arrived at allyship, would you say that you had to do a lot more research around that, or have you been putting a lot more? I would imagine you're also putting some original content out there from your own experience.
Yeah, it was a combo effort because I think our own lived experiences are really valuable, right? When we can bring that context, but recognizing your limited lens of the world is your perspective. And so you're missing out on all these other perspectives. And so something I always did in my early books, and still today, I mean, we always interview thought leaders in the space and people that have subject matter expertise or lived experience about the tools we're talking about, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to say something that's out of line with, what proven experts and researchers have done. So every book has been a blend of research and lived experience. And I like to lead with stories and then back it up with either secondary data or primary interview data to really illustrate how that comes to life, especially in something as like silly as the workplace. I mean, now, especially hybrid work. I mean, it was hard to explain before what happened in corporate. Like, what do you do when you go to work? I mean, it's such a hard question to answer. Answer emails. Like, my daughter's like, what? That's all you do? You don't make things? You don't do things? Like, yeah. It's just abstract. Especially now, again, in hybrid. So I think what I've found over the years is like, when someone asks me a question more than like 3 times, like, okay, if I don't have content on that already, that's a new blog post, that's a new article, that's a new workshop. So we've created so much content over the years. And it's, you just kind of meet people where they're at. I mean, right now, we're seeing this huge pushback of the LGBTQ plus community. And at the time we're talking today, it's the beginning of Pride Month. And
that's right.
That's something we just need to like put front and center back for corporations to understand. It doesn't mean you have to get involved in political, religious conversations. Just stand with the humans that already work for you and buy your products and services. That's all we're asking for is fairness, respect, trust. And so that's something that I just feel strongly about, having timely information for people that they can take action on right away.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I think people want that too. They want something that they can do something about, not just take in the information and then feel either helpless or like, oh, so do I have to sit in that box or that box because I don't belong in the other box? And what do I do with that?
And it's hard. It's hard for people right now.
Yeah. So tell me more about Next Pivot Point. I know you have a podcast also, and you have books, and you work with clients. So give us a little more to chew on here about what you're doing. What do you do at work, Julie?
What do I do? I'm talking to my 9-year-old. Yeah. I don't know if she would understand this language, but I do try to explain things in terms that is simple, because we have a tendency, especially in the DEI space, to make things super academic and like complicated. And I love it. I love that it's well-researched stuff, but I think we go way over people's heads with our vocabulary. sometimes. That's my shenanigans questioning. But in all seriousness, there's probably 4 things we're really strong at doing with our clients. And we serve everybody from, small nonprofits to huge, massive global corporations. So it's industry agnostic, US agnostic. But essentially people come to us with like, one, we need to measure this. Like, how do we assess if we're inclusive and our representation, right? If you haven't done that, if you're a company that hasn't done that before, you're working for a company that hasn't done that before, it is a huge risk if you have not assessed that. Legislation's coming, lawsuits, like all sorts of things, like assess where you're at. And if you don't know where you're at now, then how are you ever going to like build a plan to get there, right? So that's where priority setting comes in. It becomes crystal clear. Here are our key opportunities. Let's make some priorities around it, build a strategy. So ideally we'd work on strategic plans, or oftentimes our clients are refreshing the strategic plans they made in 2020, for example, that may or may not have come to fruition.
Right.
Tisk, tisk. Yeah. But it's okay to admit that and pivot and think about, okay, what do we want to do now? So assessment strategy, and then we're best known for education. So keynotes, workshops, really meeting people again where they're at with curriculum. We've got 40 different workshops and a team of 5 facilitators that are well-versed in everything from LGBTQ to neurodiversity to disability to race and gender. So we can bring those lived experiences when they're beyond my own as well. And then the last bucket is strategy. So, or not strategy, I already said that, senior leadership, the other S. Senior leadership, that has been a glaring mistake that a lot of companies made, is not getting that team together and really talking candidly about why are we doing this. And I have clients right now that have been working on DEI for years, and they have 2 fence sitters on their senior leadership team. And that's like, okay. And it's not okay, because those people will derail plans. Those people have huge teams of people that report to them that are going to hear a message and have cognitive dissonance with the experience that they're having in the workplace. So senior leadership team is probably my very favorite thing to do, because it has the most impact and has a huge ripple effect throughout an organization.
Yeah. And I would imagine that you have some organizations that come to you that think they just want one aspect of that, right?
One workshop, just do the LGBTQ. I keep harping on that, but Pride Month, it's a timely thing that's like, oh, I just want the one workshop. Like,
yeah, that'll solve everything. I'm curious about, assessing inclusion. How do you, if you can explain it briefly? And I know I'm probably asking you, like, what do you do for work, right? How do you measure inclusion?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think a lot of people jump to representation numbers, right? Which will tell a story, and it's important. A lot of times you can get that from your HR system, but that's the D, right? That's diversity is representation. The I is inclusion.
Right.
D doesn't work without I, and I actually needs to come first if you want to get good at D. People don't understand that. And so what I try to lead with is like, hey, let's do both at the same time. So let's get your representation data anonymously in an appropriate legal format, and people can opt out of that if they want to. But let's get the representation data at the same time we get the inclusion data. So we have an assessment with one of our partners, Spectra Diversity, that's scientifically vetted this 31 questions that are super simple to score on a Likert scale. Everything from like, do I feel a sense of belonging in the workplace, to I have direct conversations with my manager about inclusion. So real tangible behaviors, things that people could say, feelings, but also like practices. And so what comes out of that is a story. And the story is often that women are having a different experience in the workplace than men. People of color are always having a different, I will say I've never seen a study done where people of color, especially women of color, are not having a vastly different experience in the workplace compared to white male partners. Usually it's like a 20% lower, perception of inclusion and fairness. And of course, disabilities, veterans, let's make the workplace welcoming for and inclusive for all. And so once you get that data, then you can unpack, then it's really the conversation. What does this mean? What's the so what? What are the key things we need to focus on? And that's, again, where the strategic plan comes through. Let's pick the top 3 things, because we can't do all 31.
Right.
We can do 3. And maybe we focus on some of our strengths and not beat ourselves up about our weaknesses, but maybe we be honest about our weaknesses and our gaps and focus on 1 or 2. And so it's really about buy-in. It's really about resourcing. One of the big problems in our industry is it's very under-resourced. So people throw, $1,000 at an employee resource group budget that I don't think can buy you much of anything.
No.
Pays for pizza, which is really condescending,
Right.
As well.
Right.
And oftentimes the people in my field, the people I get to work with, have their day job and they have this job. And so DEI becomes the thing I do at night and weekends instead of spending time with my family. And then no wonder we have high burnout in our industry. So we need to set up the expectation in advance that if this is a priority, just like anything else in our business, we will properly resource it, meaning we will offload work from people to do it, or we will pay them more, we will promote them to do it, we will create positions to do it. That's how you demonstrate you're serious about it. And people are really smart at figuring that out if you're serious or not, right? Because we are wired to know, like, am I going to be rewarded for this? Like, or not, And that's just a primal thing that humans know.
Right. Well, and I think also if you're expecting somebody to do this in their spare time and you're not willing to put resources towards it, that's some messaging right there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so common. Common.
Yeah.
And so I really, really try to set that expectation with leaders like, okay, how important is this? Are we going to resource it? If you have a new product, a new service, sales team has a new initiative, you're making time and money for that. Like, don't treat this any different than you would any other business imperative. But unfortunately, people look at it as extra in air quotes.
Because it's not a direct revenue generating activity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I know. So did we miss anything here? Because you're doing so much. I mean, it sounds like the business has expanded and grown at a pretty rapid pace. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it has until this year. So it's we're in the throes of economic uncertainty, political uncertainty. At the time, I Pew Research actually just came out with a new report that shows, a very discouraging partisan view of DEI. And I think listeners, you can fill in where that is. But I was really surprised to see such a wide divide of people that want more DEI work versus that want less DEI work. And so we're dealing with a lot of budget cuts. A lot of my friends have been let go from organizations for having to, quit their DEI businesses to go back into the workforce. We're seeing personally that we're able to keep the lights on and cash flow, somewhat consistent, but we're having to pivot to working with global organizations instead of US-based organizations, which is frightening, honestly. We should, when I'm talking with Europe and Latin America and APAC, they're saying, y'all are US are going backwards. We have to go forwards. That's right. Yeah. You have a tremendous amount of diversity in your country. This is actually something you're good at.
Supposedly we're a melting pot here, right?
But you're seeing that melting pot boil over right now. And so just this resistance. And so we know with social change, there's a few steps forward, a few steps back. And so I think this is the few steps back period. But I have, done some soul searching, spent some time on the yoga mat and meditating and thinking on this. And 9 years in, like, I'm not letting people make me do something else for a living, especially folks that don't have the gumption to talk directly about it. It's so
I mean, when I think about it, just seems that there's well, this is going to sound too simple, but there's a need for education. I think there's just a lot of people who don't really understand what DEI is.
And we fear what we don't understand.
Exactly. And
I would gladly meet anyone where they're at. I have spent tons of time with people on very different values and beliefs than me, people in my family, people in my daughter's school. I spent a whole afternoon with a gentleman listening to, I shouldn't say gentleman, an older man that had a certain perspective. And I found when you listen to that first, like, tell me your perspective. I want to hear more. And like, would you mind hearing my perspective and sharing a little bit about mine and then going back and forth a little bit? And at the end of those conversations, people usually tell me like, I appreciate you listening. People don't usually listen when I share my opinion.
Mm.
Or, hey, I usually get like shamed and like this didn't feel like that. Like, thanks. Like,
Mm.
and I've had that one infamous example I had with someone in my daughter's school. He said, I've never met anyone like you. And to your point, we don't even understand each other because we're not talking to each other anymore.
Right.
It's very sad.
Or they see someone on the news who might be saying something along the lines of what they think you represent, and they think you're just going to come at them with anger or resentment, when in fact it's clear that your approach is well thought out and really quite thoughtful and thought-proprovoking.
Yeah, but we've got to listen first to each other. And that includes,
I agree.
probably not a lot of listeners on the podcast of the naysayer group, but if you are.
Be true, but the more people we reach, the more we have the odds go up, right?
Exactly. Don't dismiss, listeners, the value of a conversation. Again, that ripple effect. You could plant a seed that someone shares with a whole bunch of other people. It really does matter.
Yep, absolutely. And even, I think, even people who believe that they are already, let's say, enlightened, there's always room for expansion.
Yeah.
And
I just read a new book and I was 20% of it I did not know. 80% of it, I was like, okay, good. I'm talking about the right way. But the other 20%, Amy, I was like, oh, shoot, I need to fix that. I just fixed a whole slide presentation on it. 'Cause it's like, and that's fun to like unlearn.
I think that's great. I mean, I did something recently in my business where I did some research, market research, asking people about their careers and what they're liking or not liking in terms of the job market. And, there were some pieces of information they shared that they weren't complete news to me, but the way in which they looked at it and the angles in which they were sharing it was really helpful. And it definitely opened my eyes. I don't care how long you've been doing something, there's always another way to look at things. And I can really appreciate what you're saying about meeting people where they're at. It really is about listening. I mean, truly listening, not just sitting there quietly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's hard. It's a lot harder to do than you think, especially if someone's saying something that completely contradicts what you think. Our alarm bells go off in our brain, mine included. And I have just learned to be really mindful and really curious and take a lot of deep breaths.
Yes. Curiosity is very, very important.
Like, I just have to shut it off. Like, nope. And I'm always like, I know where this is going. I know where it's going. And it's like, do you? You've never met this person before. You've never had this conversation before. So it's just reminding yourself, like, and that's the fun part. Young people, just spend time with young people. They'll teach us all how to do this. They're so much better at sponging it up than we as we get older. That's
what I'm pinning my hopes on.
I think a lot of us are, but they need tools, they need resources. And Tammy,
exactly.
The last thing I'd share that I didn't have a chance to share that I'm super proud of is we have a nonprofit, the Little Allies. So that's really my most proudest accomplishment as we've started a new nonprofit, littleallies.org. Cool. Check it out. We have a new program manager that she's putting a whole bunch of fun stuff up there. And we're developing programs right now for educators, parents, caregivers, anybody that wants, like you said, education about how to be more inclusive and talk with kiddos about this. Because if we don't start early, it's really hard to correct later in life unless people just stumble upon this work, which I happen to, but I don't, again, think that's sustainable for others.
So that's called, is it the littleallies.org?
It's just littleallies.org.
Oh, Little Allies.
Yeah. I used to call it the Little Allies. So I'm in a brand transition mode, but we have a children's book. We have workbooks with activities, all sorts of fun stuff. And again, it's a nonprofit. So, if you're interested in supporting that, definitely check out littleallies.org.
Oh, definitely. Well, we will put that in the show notes, no doubt. So, Julie, where else can people find out about your work and all the amazing things that you're doing to spread the good word?
So again, my brand, nextpivotpoint.com. Check that out. We're on social media too. So on Next Pivot Point, we actually have a really cool inclusion assessment. You can take that for free. And there's a bunch of downloadable free resources there, like a diversity dictionary, an inclusive meeting checklist, all sorts of fun stuff. So go over there, and
Ooh, I love it.
all of that's for grabs. And you can find time to chat if you want to ask any questions. And then on social media, I post, multiple times a week on LinkedIn. So that's where most people follow me. Julie Kratz, Kratz. So you can follow me over there and just get some digestible nuggets. I try to make it practical and actionable.
Yeah, that's great. And one last question. We will have all of that in the show notes. And that is, so, a lot of our listeners are people who are, thinking about what's next for them. And you've made a number of changes over the years, trying different things. What would you say is a good piece of advice for someone who's considering their next pivot?
Yeah, it goes back to the question you shared earlier. What got you ticking as a kiddo? I love asking people that question. Like, what was the thing you were complimented as a kid about? What was the thing you just daydreamed about or lost time doing? For me, it was always reading and writing. Always reading and writing. I loved to be just in my head creating, and that's what I do now. But that wasn't what I was doing before, right? And so there's these clues from our childhood. And even today, what's happening on your very best days? When do you just lose track of time? Those are clues. If we pay attention to those clues, your purpose just becomes super obvious.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah, just paying attention to what absorbs you other than your email.
Oh, trust me, that can be absorbing, but not purposeful sometimes.
Yeah, but it's not. It's a different kind of absorption. It's kind of like when you get into that zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Julie, this has been absolutely delightful. And I am really excited to see where things go forward with Next Pivot Point and Little Allies and all that you're doing. I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Julie Kratz. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her early life and career transitions and current work. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 226. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or you can ask your local library to order it. If you were inspired by this episode with Julie, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd be so grateful if you'd write a brief review and rate it on Apple Podcasts. Just go to my website, tammygoularloeb.com/podcast, click on the Apple Podcast button, and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help to sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, I am so grateful for your support. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.